was born in Buffalo, New York. I went home with my mom and dad on Lakeview Avenue, 121 Lakeview, in the apartment upstairs from my father's mother and father, Anna and Vincent Zarbo. And living with Anna and Vincent Zarbo, my grandparents, was my Aunt Connie and my Uncle Vinny. And from there, Mom and Dad had an apartment, just the three of us. And my mother then was pregnant with Paula. And Paula was born soon after. Growing up was wonderful with my mother and my sister Paula. We moved in with my mom Pauline after the divorce. 358 West Avenue was where I lived with my mom Pauline, and upstairs from Mrs. Mecca. Yes, I lived with Mom Pauline and Buster and Uncle Raymond, 358 West Avenue.
Did you live with Aunt Claire and her children for a little while?
We did. It was after Mom Pauline or before Mom Pauline, I can't remember, somewhere before Lakeview projects. I lived, I remember the apartment was on Jersey. Aunt Claire had a couple apartments on Jersey. And Mother wanted to live with her sister, but the apartments were too small. So that's when we moved into Mom Pauline's house. Maybe it was 6th grade that we moved in the projects. And we had apartment 961 Perry Boulevard. Mother wanted her own place and she applied. It took a while because the projects were brand new and they were popular for people that couldn't afford the high rent. So it was all about Mother's income on how we got an apartment in the projects, 961, an end condo right on the boulevard, but it was in the projects, and we were the end unit. It was nice, very nice, because an end unit had the windows all around the outside, and an end unit was very private, and we'd hang our clothes outside in the summer, and in the kitchen. We'd hang in the kitchen, and Mother had the wringer washer, I remember, and there was the three of us, Penny, Paula, and Winnie, my mother.
I was born on Labor Day, September 2nd, 1940, at the St. Joseph Children's Asylum, was a hospital attached to the orphanage on Edward and Elmwood, South Elmwood. Most home deliveries were before the war, but as the war started, we went to the hospital. We resided at 195 Effner Street and amongst the neighborhood of all friends and relatives, mostly relatives, cousins upon cousins and cousins, because my grandma Pinto was one of 13. So we had a very large family and they were spread out throughout Western New York. So our neighborhood was loaded with friends and people, and Paese being the people that come from the same town or same region of Sicily that your grandparents came from. So we lived amongst them. We were, we come of humble means. My father worked at the Chevy plant. He was a first hire in 1935. When they built the plant, he worked on construction, then became one of the first employees. He was number 2 hire at the Chevy plant. He was making about $30 to $40 a week at the time, take home. So we lived very modestly in a very old home that was a homestead home for my grandparents when they first bought it on Effner Street, 195. The Gizzos lived at 189. Uncle Charlie lived at 185. My grandmother lived at 186. And the cousins and so forth lived on Carolina and Effner, a block away. On in 43 Virginia, Rose Murata lived with my uncle, my great uncle, James Panapinto and Aunt Carrie. Rose, Charlie were their children. They had a son, George, who died during the flu epidemic in 1918. Growing up it was a great place. We ate well. We didn't know we were poor, but we got used to hand-me-downs. Clothing was handed down regularly. My mom would sew and repair it, size it for us so we could wear it, shorten it, and that's what we wore. Shoes were once a year, and usually at the start of school. They never did last the whole school year, but so the shoe repairman was a steady diet, just fixing them up. Uncle Jim was a pretty accomplished hardwareist who had a hardware store in Virginia, 43 Virginia Street. And Aunt Carrie, his wife, had ice cream, lemonade stand, candy store adjoining them. On the corner, the Shabettas had their grocery store. And across the street were the Jambras, all related to us. And we played in the sand lots. There were some dump lots along where the thruway is now, the 190, at the foot of Virginia. It was full with the rubble from downtown demolitions for over the years. And it was an old canal that they filled in. And that was our place to play. And we had cookouts there, we'd have roasted potatoes, and we'd enjoy the time, and outings at the pool, Centennial Pool. Very simple life, but it was based on the backdrop of our faith life, which was Holy Cross with Monsignor Gambino. My mom prayed. She was born on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. She died on the eve of the Assumption of the Blessed Mary Virgin, and she was devoted to the Blessed Mother and her rosary her whole life. A rosary in one hand and a baking spatula in the other, and that was her mode. And very religious person. She'd take me and my sister of happy memories to church 2 or 3 times a week for novenas to pray for others. We had a wonderful life.
So was
If they were respectful to other people, older people, we were. They didn't cheat. They struggled. We were prepared. We learned how to struggle. And we learned how not to cheat. So later in life, when you get along and you get into the business world, it's very easy to sway from that philosophy. But it's inbred into you because it's so against your grain, because you were mentored properly. My father used to help people like no tomorrow. We were on the Crystal Beach boat one time. A girl fell down the stairs of that. She fainted and fell down from the seasickness, fell down the stairs. He was the first over there. He got her all propped up. He was massaging her feet and legs and brought her to. He had smelling salts on him because he had fighters, and they used to give the fighters the smelling salts to wake him up when they get back to the corner. So he had it in his pocket. It was like somebody kept there all the time. And he got her revived. A couple of times I see him do that. Everybody went. He got cold beer, and he was putting it around her ankles and around her arms and everything to cool her off and got her going. I remember that. I remember him taking time and going to Mr. Pete's house. The family disowned him, and he would help Mr. Pete out and do things for Pete, milk his goats for him. And he took a lot of the black fighters and brought them under his control and treated them like sons and took care of them. Brought them home to dinner at times, always doing something good. My mother was the same. Uncle Andy would sleep, and they had all disembarked out of Buffalo when they got to the Army, and when they came back on leave, they'd always come through Buffalo. This is the rail hub. They didn't go to Lockport. And so they always took them in. Sometimes they came in with their friend buddies that they took home with them that didn't have families close by. And my mother would put them up, feed them, do their laundry for them, pack them all up to go back, sew their patches. Usually when they went on leave, they would either get promoted or demoted. And she'd sew on their new sergeant stripes or corporal stripes on their shirts. My mother would. And just genuinely doing. And my mother, I remember, took care of my grandmother. She was in bed. And there was no hospice then.
Mm-hmm.
And we were married. And took care of my grandmother till the undertaker came and take her away. My father never hit me. He didn't tell me what to do. He told me what not to do. I'm praying. Faith life. I remember her stirring the sauce, coming home one day. I was an adult, before I was married. Coming home, and she had Chucky under her arm. On her arm, she was breastfeeding. In this hand that she was holding him with, she had the rosary. Then she had the big wooden spoon, and she was spooning that. And in between, she was saying, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord.
Aw.
While she started. So there's nothing I did that she didn't praise. Shovel the sidewalk, put the salt on the sidewalk, shovel the coal, bring it in to put in the stove, fill the bucket up so she could start the stove for canning with coal. Everything I did, she praised. So you're moved by some people who have qualities beyond their status. People are poor, but they're still generous. People are rich, don't give anything, don't care about it, just for themselves. So, those are the people that influence your life. My grandma Filipovich was a very frail person. I mean, of stature. She wasn't built heavy. She had a goiter here, very large growth of goiter, and a lack of iodine.
Really?
In her diet. And they took two of her children, boys, to go to the service. They drafted Uncle Johnny and Uncle Andy. Uncle George was left home to help take care of the farm. He had a job. And he had asthma too. So the boys went off to service, and my grandmother prayed all the time. I remember staying there because my mother and father would send me there because they were going to bomb cities. They were in blackouts in the cities because the Germans were attempting to come to the United States and come from different spots and bomb the United States industrial areas. So they would send me to stay with my grandmother. So we had she had 2 stars in her, gold stars in her flag that they gave her, the Defense Department, in the window. So the Iceman used to stop and give ice, and he would give it for nothing. They were very compassionate people. And so my mother would come on weekends. She'd run the team of horses, and they'd be dragging a wagon, hay wagon, with a self-loader on the back. My mother would be driving the horse, I'd be riding alongside of it. And my aunts would be making sure that all the hay got on the loader and it went on. And then we brought it up to the barn, and then my aunts used the claw and they brought it up. There was no bales of hay at that time. It was just free hay and straw. So my grandmother used to cut almost a half an acre a day by hand. I have the sickles in the garage. I gave one to Isabella. I got 2 more sickles. And she used to, by hand, she had a rhythmic motion. And she'd be there all day long, and she'd put it, as she went, it would flip off her scythe, they call it, a scythe. would slip off the slide and make a nice perfect row. So when my mother straddled with the horses, with the it would then pick up with there were two, she would space them like this, look. A row here, maybe that high, a row there of grass. My grandmother would do it as she was doing it. Some close, some far, some close, some far. Okay? And she was left-handed. So when my mother would have the horses, there would be a pile, a row of hay here and hay that dried. The horses would walk in between it so they wouldn't try it down, and then the elevator, the hay elevator, would come with the forks on it, take it up, put it on, and then my mother would drive the team over. So they all helped out. My grandmother had a tough time. Uncle George, she was milking 6 cows. And she had a hard time making ends meet. They'd pick up the thing and she'd get like $2.50 for each can of milk. And my uncle would pick up the cans. She'd get about two or three cans of milk a week, a day. She'd put them in the well to keep them cold, and then she would take them out early in the morning, and then the guy would come and pick them up from the dairy. Well, she struggled along keeping the farm going. And because her boys were away and it was too difficult for the girls, they were teenagers. Aunt Anna and Aunt Katie were teenagers. They had a hard time making ends meet. So she owed $800 to the farmer up the road that they bought the farm from. He foreclosed on them and auctioned off all their equipment, including her cows. So she was when they talk about the greatest generation, she was the greatest generation. She sacrificed everything for the war. Well, guess what? Her 2 boys came home safe. She was a very tough woman she saw the war from a different perspective, sacrifice, and eventual, her whole life saving down the road. Sold her horse named Jerry. That was her horse's name, Jerry. She had to sell him. My other grandmother, Panapino, was a saintly woman. She prayed a lot. She was a midwife for the whole neighborhood. She delivered all the cousins, all the Gizzos, all the cousins. And she's one of 13. She was the oldest of 13 children. She delivered some of her brothers and sisters. So one day Uncle Charlie had a garage next to him he bought. And I was in my tire shop and I was fixing tires. She was across the street upstairs. My uncle brought her to live on Effner Street after my grandfather died. She was living on Vermont Street, but then after my grandfather died, she came back down the old neighborhood. She said, George, come on, I got some soup for you. She made chicken soup. What does she make chicken soup out of? Chicken feet and chicken entrails, the guts of the chicken. She'd wash them out, put them on the faucet, clean them out, we called it ribbon soup. Chicken combs, the combs on her head. All of that she'd put in the soup, along with homemade noodles, egg noodles. She said, I got chicken soup, come on over. Okay, Graham, as soon as I finish this tire, I got 2 more tires to finish. I had to fix so many tires. Before I can finish the tires, she comes by me. She's got her hair in a kerchief tied tight. She's got an apron on and they folded it up and carried. That's what they carried with. She's got towels and stuff in there, linens. And she says, George, I gotta go. I'll be right back. As soon as I get back, I'll have you over for soup. Okay, Grant, no problem. I got other things I gotta do. A couple hours later, she come back. Now you come up from the soup. Now I got the soup ready. So I go up to the house. And she said, oh, sit down, wash your hands. We had her wash her hands. She had homemade soup. There's a knock at the door. She was busy dishing out the soup. She said, George, hey, get the door. See who's at the door. I go at the door. And the guy's there she lived upstairs. the top of the stairs. Open the door. Yes? It's Sicoloria here. Sicoloria means one of high praise. So when she walked down the street, everybody was on their porch. Most of them were relatives. A lot weren't relatives, but there were a lot of relatives. They would say, "Good morning, Sicoloria, you of high praise." She said, "Who's at the door? At the door?" And he takes his hat off. He had one of pork pie hats. Is Sicoloria here? And then my grandmother came to the door, wiping her hands. "Oh, yeah, yeah." He says, "I want to thank you for delivering my son. Everything is fine. Everything went well." My mother's admonition was, some things I got along because some things are better left unsaid.
What about Grandpa? Either one of your grandpas or your other grandma? Grandpa Ben?
Well, I would visit them because, well, we lived with them when I was a little baby, and then I would just visit them. Mother wanted me to visit them, so I'd walk.
oh.
I'd walk to the house
Mm-hmm.
from Montplains because we lived with Montplain for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So from Montplain's house, I'd walk to visit my father's parents.
Any memories with Aunt Paula when you were young?
When she was in school and I was in school, and then I would just visit them. Mother wanted me to visit them, so I'd walk.
Oh.
I'd walk to the house
Mm-hmm.
from Montplains because we lived with Montplain for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So from Montplain's house, I'd walk to visit my father's parents. And then we would go together and go home together. Paula and Penny on the hands of Father McGurn.
Mm-hmm.
He would be up, you know, the big man,
Mm-hmm.
and he'd have both their hands, and we'd go home to Montplain.
My maternal grandfather, Grandma Pinto's father, who died in 1935, before I was born. But after they were married, and so I didn't know him at all. I knew my grandmother, Filipovich, Catherine, very well because it was wartime, and and my mom and dad worked at the defense plants. My dad at the Chevy, and my mother at the canning factory on Virginia Street, where they made rations for the soldiers. They would can the produce and send it ready-made meals for the troops. So I wasn't of age to go to school, so they shipped me off to my grandmother, and they'd come and visit on weekends. And so I was raised with my grandma Filipovich, Aunt Anna, and Aunt Katie, who were still home, and Uncle George. Uncle John and Uncle Andy left for the services. Uncle Johnny went to the Marines Expeditionary Force and against Japan in the Pacific, and Uncle Andy went against the Nazis in Germany, Normandy, and all of Europe. Uncle George was the local. He was spared the draft because Grandma already had 2 boys into service, and he had asthma, so he was spared the draft, and he was a local milkman. He collected the milk from the farmers, and then he brought it to the dairy, Castle's Dairy in Lockport, right near the Palace Theater, across the street from the Palace Theater. And that's where they bottled it and so forth. He also got a job during the war working at the Simon's Saw Company, which was converted to making armaments, bombs, and so forth during the war. So I spent most of my time, I slept between Aunt Anna and Aunt Katie for a long time when I was a little guy. I remember it distinctly. We had a patch quilt that my grandmother had made from all discarded coats and so forth. And the register was on the floor. We slept in the upstairs attic area. And we slept by the register to get the heat from the kitchen. And they kept me warm and entertained. Uncle George, because I was his namesake, in some degree I was his namesake, and he would bring me toys and so forth and distribute them to me, little caterpillars and wind-up toys, and he would play knock me down with the Lincoln Logs kind of thing with me every day. So I married it. I remember that very distinctly. From 1 to 3.5, that's what we did. That was the wartime. So about 1944, I then went to Holy Cross. I went to number 1 school. They took me at an early age. I was too young for school at the time. So they put me in pre-primer, and because of my age, I failed pre-primers. They wouldn't let me advance to kindergarten. So that's when I came living exclusively in Buffalo and not being at my grandmother's most of the time. And then from there, I went to Holy Cross School in 4th grade with Monsignor Gambino and so forth, and then went to school at Holy Cross and became the crossing guard captain. The AAA sponsored a program because they had no crossing guards, no police to cross you at the corners, no crossing guards. So they enlisted the help of deputized us that we could take numbers down and actually report people who made the turn or endangered the life of the kids. And we had safety belts and badges, and I was the captain. So I had quite a chore there, and I was in charge of the milk patrol. Milk patrol gave out food and milk each day to school children to nourish them. And I was in charge of taking the orders, whether it's chocolate milk or white milk, from each room each day, and marking it down, meeting the milk truck, sorting it out by room, and then I had 4 helpers bigger guys that would help me carry it to the rooms, and I would call out the names, and they would come up and get their milk. Then I became an altar boy when I was of age, around 4th grade, and I became the president of Altar Boys Society, and so I had to make the schedules up for mass schedules. Who had to serve each mass? Who was called upon for funerals? Who was called upon for weddings? The drunken best men didn't know any better. They slip you $5 or $10. At that time, it was unheard of money, but it was quite a jaunt until Father found out we were making so much money that we had to contribute it to the general fund of the Altar Boys Christmas party. My paternal grandfather, I only knew for a short period of time. He was in a wheelchair, a big high wood wheelchair like President Roosevelt used to have. If you see some movies of President Roosevelt, they have high back wood chairs. My dad would go over there periodically. The family would follow, and he would get him into the bathtub, wash him, and leave him to soak in there because he was half paralyzed. He had a stroke and he was half paralyzed. I remember being potty trained, and they would sit me in there while my grandpa was in the bathtub with a warm bath. My dad would come in and wash him, then he'd sit in the warm water, and they put the washboard in front of him with the straw so he could drink his milk, warm milk, before he went to bed. And I'd be sitting on the toilet looking at him. It was quite an experience of a lifetime. And then when we'd get up, we'd have to recite. My cousin Rosalie and Anthony lived in the back flat on Vermont Street. So all the grandchildren had to recite the numbers in Italian, the good mornings, the goodbyes in Italian to make us proficient in Italian. My grandfather died, I want to say in 1945. And I remember distinctly staying up and keeping vigil with my dad in the couch, a blue chair, a barrel chair, upholstered chair. And I kept vigil with my dad, who prayed and cried all night while I was sitting in the same chair with him. And then I remember when they had to take his body out that day, they had a hard time getting him down the stairway. with the big coffin because it was a narrow stairway. And they put it in Joe Spano's hearse. I remember that distinctly. And then we followed him to Joe Spano's funeral home. But my grandmother was, Filipovich was a tremendous person. She took care of herself, took care of others. She had many boarders, German boarders, people from the old country, because they understood many languages. And so it was convenient for them to get help for the farm, for the immigrants who came in, much like it is today. The immigrants came in looking for jobs, and so she boarded them. They'd eat meals with us, sit with us. I remember one guy, Hans, his name was, on Drum Road, and I remember him eating with us. And his chore was to bring the cows in every night and get them hayed down. And I'd go out with my grandma at 4:30 in the morning with carrying her lantern while she did her milking. And I always got a treat by getting a squirt of creamy milk in my mouth. She said, "Open your mouth, George," and she'd aim just right, and I had the benefit of getting a nice swig or two of fresh milk. I remember killing chickens. She'd chop off their heads and let them run around the yard until they bled free. But we got no dark meat. It was always nice and clean, no blood clog meat, because she did that. And I remember feeding the chickens, making butter, churning butter on her porch, hours on end, while she'd sing, talk. I'd sing, she'd talk. And so that's what my experience was with my grandma Filipovich. My grandma Pinto was a superwoman, a saintly woman. Everybody came to her. She was the oldest of the 13. She delivered, most of her siblings were delivered. She gave birth to her mother's children. She helped with their birth. And she delivered almost every other cousin in the neighborhood. All the Gizos got delivered because they were children of her sister, her niece. So she delivered most of all the family. So when she walked down the street, they wouldn't say, "Good afternoon, Rosalia," which was her name. They would say, "Sabenedica." Sabenedica means you of praise. So it'd be like saying of the mayor or the judge, "Your honor, your honor." And so each porch she passed by, they'd say, "Good morning, Benedict." They'd always say it. So they were always so respectful for my grandmother. And when people were hurt and down, she made her own potions. She had working rapport with Strutzy's drugstore and the drugstore Frank, the druggist, on 15th and Normal. And they would call her for different potions she made, and she would get supplies from them so she could make her own potions. And I can't tell you the list of cousins that used to come at night to her house, lay on the bed while she poured the oil into an aching ear, a mustard plaster on their back when they're working on construction, a sprained ankle, a pussy sore that got infected, while she burned the candles in front of them and prayed over them as they were laying there in their treatment mode. So she was a very wonderful person, and she was a great cook. She made dishes out of nothing, emblematic of her humble upbringing. We had many days we had chicken soup made out of chicken heads, chicken combs, chicken feet. Never really chicken, but the parts of chicken. Eggplants, campanatina, pastas. She made her own pastas, dried it. She had the big pasta pole, which doubled as a spread pole. She could put the spreads on the beds, because the bedrooms were so small in those days. They were only 8 by 10. so you could never reach the other side. So she used her pasta pole to fix her beds with the sheets she couldn't reach over. Some nights she would invite my mom over, and they would have tea and some of her cookies, cucciadati and things as they were making. Or making sausage night. We'd make Italian sausages on some nights. I'd use the grinder, turn the grinder for her. And then as she stuffed them, I would turn the grinder as she shaped the sausages. When they finished, my mom, her and Panino would sit around in the living room, us on the floor, my brother, sister, we were playing Chinese checkers with marbles, and they were saying the rosary. And they were embroidering while they did that. Many times they just let us sit in their place, and they taught us how to hem and stitch and sew buttons on. So anyway, it's my memories of childhood. It was a beautiful place, a beautiful time. We never knew we were poor. We were so rich. We had all our cousins, our friends, everybody we loved around us. There were so many special days. Around the holidays, the Knights of Columbus from 184 Council in Delaware would come down with baskets of food in the back of their station wagons and asking for the poor children to come out to give us baskets. We appreciated the baskets. I think we had a lot better food at home, but we really appreciated their generosity to us. I'll never forget that. My father, when he was a youngster, he was the younger of the family. So, like the youngest of the family, he gets a little more free ride than anybody else. So he was kind of a, wiry, adventurous fellow. So he took up with an Italian minstrel, a puppeteer, and he learned puppeteering. He'd run the grinder, playing the music, while the puppeteer would do it, and he'd be one of the voices. And they would speak in Italian. Hello, good morning, how are you? And all that in Italian. And one guy'd rush on stage, the puppeteer, and he'd knock the other puppet over, and the kids would be all howling and laughing while my dad was doing the grinder, the music. And then he took up puppeteering. So later on, after he went to work at the Chevy plant, he came by with his organ, and he had a monkey with him at the time. And he had the puppets. My dad hopped right on the back of his old Ford pickup truck, Model T truck, where the stage was, and he was working the puppets, and he was lending the voice to some of the. And when it came to a female voice, he would squeak it out. Hello, how are you? That kind of. It was hilarious. I was a paper boy at the Courier Express, and I'd start out in the morning at 5:30. My route was pretty long. It was from Huron Street and Niagara up to South Elmwood to Porter Avenue.
Wow, that is far.
Down to Niagara Street all the way up.
What about Shoeshine Boy?
15 cents. Chippewa Street, where there were a lot of dives and speakeasies.
Mm-hmm.
We'd work there. Town Casino on Main Street, we'd work there, but we weren't allowed at night. We couldn't go out after 6.
How old were you when you Shoeshine Boy?
10 years old.
And Paper Boy after that?
Paper Boy I had from 12 to 14.
What about your siblings?
8 days older than me. He was a jokester. He thought, he could get away with it with me. I fought back a lot, a couple times. One time I was threatened to leave home because he wouldn't stop. I packed my bag and he made fun of me. My mom took pictures. I sent them all around that I was leaving town. Well, I was boxing when I was 4. Yeah, I started out at 32 pounds. The boxing gloves were 1 pound, 16 ounce a piece. So, anyway, so my brother, he stuck by me. He was always a big brother. And as we got older, he stuck by me, he picked a lot of fights. And I never really picked fights, but I always defended myself. I never picked a fight. I don't remember picking a fight ever. My father taught that the science of boxing is how not to get hurt, not to how much pain you can inflict on somebody, how much you could take, but how much you can avoid. Because that's the real winner. My father was a boxer, yeah. He was fighting this guy, a big German guy. The guy butts him, and he breaks a tooth on him. My father saw the tooth, went crazy, and the guy knocked the heck out of him. They said it was my cousin Charlie, John Byrne, all the people that were at the fights, my godfather, George Leslie. They were at the fights saying, "Oh, Tony killed that guy, beat him out because he broke his tooth."
Oh.
And he won an Elgin watch. I still have the Elgin watch. He gave to my mother. Years later, I was doing 1980, when you got married, I was going down Niagara Street doing a pipeline job on Hurdle and Niagara Street. And there was a barber shop next to Brennan's men's store. And the barber came out with his white jacket on. He said, "You know Pinto? Did I see Pinto on the truck?" "Yes, Uncle Charlie." "Do you know Tony Pinto?" He said, "Man alive." He said, "I knocked his tooth out, broke his tooth. And he beat the hell out of me." He said, "But he became a good friend of mine. He used to stop in here for his haircut."
Do you know how you got the nickname Penny?
Well, there was a song popular at that time, Pennies from Heaven.
Don't you know you flowers contain pennies from heaven?
Anyway, I was named after my grandmother because my father decided firstborn in a family, in the Zarbo family, would be named after his mother, Anna Tina. But they used Annette and then called me Penny.
Who was your childhood best friend? Did you have any childhood best friend, or you just hung around with Gregory?
That's it. It was Gregory, and then when I went to school, it was Nancy Favada. Yeah, once I started school, it was Nancy Favada and Mary Jane. The last name is slipping from me, but she was in the project. Mary Jane, it was just walking back and forth to school. I never was in her apartment, and she didn't visit me either. It was just back and forth to Grover, Holy Angels and Grover. But with Nancy, we just laughed and gathered together in her house, and we just didn't have anything more to do but just talk and laugh.
Did you have a favorite teacher?
Sister John Marie, she was so young and pretty and so soft-spoken. I remember her from 6th grade.
Did you have a favorite subject at school?
And yeah, when I got to high school, typing was interesting and active, but I didn't have a subject. No, I just wanted to go home.
Do you remember any special foods or family gatherings?
Oh, we had family gatherings, yes, we did. And there was a lot of sauce and soup and salads and lots of nuts to crack, shell nuts. And we had birthdays and holidays, and it was all around the table with Uncle Raymond and Buster and Paula and Mom. We lived in the back room off the kitchen for a while before we got that apartment in the projects.
How did Grandma Winnie care for you and Aunt Paula as a single mother?
Oh, she did fine. She was loving and kind and generous to make sure we had the best of everything that she could afford. We laughed, and she took us with her when she went places, and we went downtown Buffalo, and she showed us where she was working at the booth for the camera. She did the photos, and especially busy when it was the time for the men to come in for their picture photo for the truck drivers.
Crystal Beach, Mom?
Oh, of course. She'd pack up the lunch. Aunt Claire would pack up her lunch, and it would be Gregory and Linda with Aunt Claire. And Mom, we would be with Paula, and we'd always bring the lunch, and then we could have something as a treat at Crystal Beach. It probably would be cotton candy. That was a must. Yeah, Aunt Claire, and that was our activity. And we go often, and so often they decided to rent a cabin. Yeah, we had the cabin. It was the best thing because then we could be there more.
Okay.
Aunt Claire would pay 1 week, and
Uh-huh.
Mother would pay 1 week, and it was 2 weeks at Crystal Beach.
Do you remember anything that you did on the weekends?
It was the Crystal Beach boat. Oh yeah, with Gregory, just the two of us.
What about the story of saving pennies for fireworks and losing them at the Peace Bridge?
We used to collect bottles. Beer bottles were thrown on the street by the guys. So we'd save up the money, go around collecting the bottles, especially on the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
And we save up the money, and it saved about $2 or $3, $4 worth of coins. And then we paid the 5 cents at the bridge to walk over to Peace Bridge in Fort Erie. We bought fireworks. We came back, and I had a large mason jar filled with fireworks. So we were on Effner Street, and it was 4th of July, and people were doing things. Some guys were shooting guns off. Some guys were setting flares off, and all kinds of things going on. And I went out with my jar, and I was giving my cousins and friends one firecracker at a time, and then I'd set one off. We'd put them under bottles, paper cuffs and that to see how far they would go. And the police pulled up, and they grabbed me by the shoulders, by the collar, and they took my bottle away after I'd just gotten started. So that was the end of my trips to Fort Erie.
What about the story of your grandfather traveling internationally and speaking 7 languages?
My grandfather's father was an officer in the Austrian-Prussian army, part of the Ottoman Empire at the time. And as he was stationed throughout the empire, whether it be Austria, Poland, Germany, Turkey, wherever, Croatia, he was sent to school because the family traveled with him. And so he got an education at various spots. So he could write many languages, and he could speak seven languages plus English. Oh, he had a full education. He was like an officer, like a colonel or something in the army. My grandmother had pigs, and I used to slop the pigs. And Uncle Andy had pigs, and I stayed over there often. I'd slop the pigs. You take a pail that was left in the kitchen where all the seeds and the rinds and trimmings from the vegetables were put. And then in the morning, you'd warm up water on a kettle, and you'd warm up the water in a kettle, and you'd take 2 measures of whey and wheat feed, and you'd mix it in there. It was all the things they threw away after they thrashed, get the hulls off the wheat, and they would, obviously the dry wheat would get broken up. Mm-hmm. So they'd use that, and we'd put the mash in there with warm water, and then we poured in the trough a hollowed out log, and then the pigs would go to town and eat it up. And it was always near an orchard, so we were instructed to pick up the dropped apples and so forth and bring them over to throw them in the trough.
And what did your grandpa do? What did her husband do?
He was a moonshiner after they came out of Pennsylvania and moved up to New York. Prussia, they call it. That's where all the Prussians moved. Like where Italians go, like on Hurdle Avenue, where they went to Prussia, which is between Royalton and Lockport. They call it Little Prussia because everybody spoke German and Slavic languages. So when he moved to Prussia, he became a bootlegger because that was a time of bootlegging in the 20s. He parked, if you know the canal where the locks are in Lockport, there's an access ramp that goes down. You can drive down there, where they used to take the mules down from the barns up on top, walk them down, attach them to so they could pull them. When the mules came this way and they stopped, they would go on to the other side and go down the other ramp. So one day, my grandfather was leaving something off at some restaurant up there, and he parked right in the way of the ramp. And he set the brake and left my mother in the car. And she was worried that she would go down that steep slope, wind up in the canal. She always talked about it. I was so worried. My dad left me and went inside. But he would always pacify her by buying her ice cream or something. So that was his act when he came to New York. Prior to that, he was hired by the railroads and the mining companies to talk and speak to as an overboss for Aldi. Because he was a big guy, like Uncle Andy, very big guy. So then after Stephen died, my grandmother wanted out of there. She says it was the coal, and that was causing the breathing problems.
How did he die?
Flu.
Oh, flu.
1918.
How old was he?
12. She convinced him, we got to get out of here, because they were all talking about it. Everybody that went in the lines, it's all they wore was a handkerchief over their nose. And they all had respiratory problems. So my grandmother blamed the flu epidemic as being a respiratory problem with her son. So they had to get out of there. So they came up to Prussia, which is Royalton, glorified, and to Clarence to Lockport area.
What did people do in your community?
Mostly community things, outside visiting, sidewalk visiting, porch visiting. That was it, playing on the street. A random car would come and they'd stop. They wouldn't blow the horn. They'd just stop and everybody knew to get out of the way. And that was our playground. Everybody played street sports, touch football, baseball, sandlot baseball, playing catch, tug of wars. We didn't have bikes. I never had a bike. Couldn't afford one. When I was about 8, Uncle Charlie gave me Rosalie's first girl's bicycle because he bought her a new one. At that time, I was reluctant to drive it because the guys would make fun of you because you had a girl's bicycle, I rode it a little bit when I ever didn't have a lot of cousins out to make fun of me, and I rode it. And then my cousin Rosalie, when I laid it down to do something, pick up something or do something, she came and got it and said, "This is my bike." Well, I took it back from her, and she started slapping me, so I slapped her. So in order to prevent that from that time, I come up with the idea that mechanics were working in the garage next to Uncle Charlie's house, and they would throw out parts of trucks. And sometimes the trucks had an air horn, but the air horn that you run the bubble, you'd squeeze the bubble. So I got one of those large air horns I put on the handlebars. That was a big thing with the kids. They wanted to hear the horn. They'd all go like this. So when I rode it, so they were starting to accept the idea that I would ride a girl's bike. One of the discards was a Mack truck steering wheel. I had the welder hook it up, and in place of the handlebars, I put the steering wheel from a Mack truck. Everybody wanted my bike. I did get a bike. My 50th birthday, a Roadmaster.
But as a child, do you remember going to the churches with Grandma?
My mother would go to Mass, or novenas, 3 times a week. Wednesdays it was at Immaculate Conception, and she made that novena, and she dedicated it to my uncles who were in the Army, in the Marines. That was her way. And so we'd walk up to South Elmwood and Edward Street, where it's located. We'd go to novena on Wednesdays. Saturday night was a Lady of Fatima novena at Holy Cross. So we'd walk up to Holy Cross. Each of our walks, wherever we were going, she'd say the rosary there, and we'd say the rosary back. Fatima was for world peace. Stop the wars. The other was specific, the Immaculate Conception, because that was my mother's patron saint. She was born on the Immaculate Conception. There'll be a novena at Holy Angels and or St. Anthony's.
How was Dr. Serio related to?
Dr. Serio married Frances Sciabetta, Dr. Sciabetta's sister. Dr. Sciabetta and Frances and Ann O'Gorick, another sister, my grandma was their aunt. Their mother was my grandmother's sister.
Pinto.
Shabetta.
Grandma Pinto's.
Grandma Manuel Pinto.
What about Dr. Serio's farm?
He started a farm out in Lancaster and he had sheep. With Francis, he would go out to our family's farms out in Middleport. All my great uncles had farms. On my grandmother's side, not my Filipova side, the Manuel side. My Uncle Frank had Middleport farms. Uncle Sam, they all have farms. So he used to go out to the farms a lot. Dr. Serio, when they'd go out for picking when he was going to school. And then he met Francis, and then he got married.
How did your grandma Filipovich kill the chickens?
She'd take a butcher knife and cut the head off, and they would flop around the chicken yard for 5 minutes till they bled out. And there was never any blood stain in their bodies. They bled out. And then she'd pick it up. They'd have boiling water going. She'd dunk them in there, shred them, clean them, and bring them over the fire that was there for the boiling water. And she would take the pin feathers off, melt them off. My grandmother was very resourceful. She was dumbfounded when my mother would come back to visit after being married, explain how in Buffalo people were starving during the Depression. They were in soup lines. They were all starving. They had no bread. They had no nothing. My grandmother used to make care bushels my father would carry for his family back to Buffalo of her hams or her. She couldn't understand. What do you mean they have no food? What about their hams? What about their this? Then they do their eggplant, pickle their eggplant. Then they can. How come they don't have any food? They don't have any hams hanging, no bacon. She couldn't understand. She had her eggs. She had all this plenty, food aplenty. Never needed anything.
What was your first job?
Was with Uncle Charlie. $1 a week, and I'd go after school and gas the trucks up and make notes in the office how much gas they used. I advanced, then I was greasing on Saturdays, gassing up, and then greasing trucks on Saturdays when I was 12. Then when I was 14, changing oil, greasing.
How much were you paid when you were a greaser?
Greaser at the end, about $2, $3 a week. Then when I was 15, I started fixing truck tires. Because the servicemen from the tire companies, Goodyear, DF Goodrich, Uniroyal, their servicemen wouldn't come all the time. And I had a shop next to Uncle Charlie's house, across from my grandmother's house. Uncle Charlie was 185, my grandmother was 186. Started working full time at $20 a week, fixing tires on the job. The New York Central job, building the hump on Harlem and Bailey. When trains come in with fruit or vegetables or beef from the Midwest, they would come. So Buffalo was a transshipment point. So the trains would come. How do you separate the trains and say, I got 100 cars of beef? Well, it would pull up to a queue on a hump, and they would put it there. And then the locomotives would push it up to the hump, to the top, and then the guy would press the button and release that to make a train that was going to New York. Then on this side would be vegetables that come, or fruit and vegetables that came from California. They would be on another train, and those would come up, and they would take two cars of vegetables, put it on there, 2 cars of fruit go on there, 2 cars of beef go on there, and then they would take off and go to New York. My uncle bought me a Jeep, a used Jeep, a government Jeep that was used, painted white by a gas station. Negrelli's gas station on Niagara Street were selling it. He bought it for me. So I fixed the tires at the shop and bring them out on the job. They were getting a lot of flats because they'd run over the spikes from the railroad. We were taking out the old railroad, so they would have a lot of flats. Because we weren't on the road, it was off-road. Didn't want to buy new tires all the time. So I pulled the spikes out, and then they cut old car tires, put them in them, and made them functional. I had to travel between Harlem Road, which is the Thruway Plaza. That's where it started, right at Thruway Plaza. We ripped out the yards beyond Thruway Plaza. So I had to get from there to Bailey Avenue. I wasn't old enough to have a license, so Uncle Charlie gave me a sheriff's card. And I was able to, he said, if you're stopped, just use the card. I got stopped a couple of times, but nothing serious. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was parked in the street, had the flashers on, working on a truck. Guy wanted to know, what are you doing here? You guys are dangerous. You see your license. So I was showing the card. He said, okay, go ahead. Those were the days, my friend, when men were men. I had tires, and I was welding and pulling wrenches with the mechanic Al Wozniak. Then he got hurt. So that's actually when I took over the truck. So while he was in the hospital getting well, his son left the Ford plant. He was working as a mechanic at the Ford plant. Ford plant used to be on right by the end of the Skyway. It was an assembly plant. They put cars together. Uncle Charlie had the contract for garbage removal from the plant, pallets, all kinds of junk. And so we'd go at night. My father would go after work, and I'd go with him, and we'd load up paint cans, cut-offs, rubber flaps and stuff, and all kinds of stuff.
Dad, what do you remember about life during and after World War II?
The war was on for 5 years that I was born. So I remember going to the movies, watching the newsreels of the bombings and the shooting down on the plains and the Marines. When I'd stay at my grandma, I stayed at my grandma's on the farm because Grandma Pinto was working at a rations factory where they canned foods for soldiers. And Grandpa Pinto was working at the Chevy plant making the Cobra engines. So they was always worried that the Germans would sabotage or bomb the cities. So for safety reasons, I was sent to my grandma Filipovich's farm. I remember during the war, the whole neighborhood would come out because the U.S. was fighting Italy as well, Mussolini. And so there was always that question whether the Italians in the neighborhood were going to be loyal and not rebel against the U.S. government. So they would hold a rally on the street with American flags, and they hang Mussolini above Uncle Charlie's garage in effigy, hanging. They made a stuffed man's pants and so forth with a uniform like he'd had on, looked like a soldier, Mussolini. And they hang him there, death to Mussolini, death to Mussolini. After Italy fell, they were going into Germany. Then they hanging Hitler above Uncle Charlie's garage. And then they would sing the national anthem, and everybody had either flashlights or candles they were holding. And Uncle Charlie was a warden, or air raid warden. He had a white helmet and a badge. When the sirens went off, everybody's lights had to go out in the house so that the enemy bombers couldn't find us. So Uncle Charlie had to go to the neighborhood, and then most of them were relatives and say, "You got a light on, I could see it. And gotta put it on, gotta give you a ticket." They would holler at him in Italian. When I got 3, I was sent to a school, and it's called pre-primer. Primed you up for school. I shouldn't have been there. I was 3, but I was just 3. My mother's understood Italian because she lived with Italians on the farm, and she understood German very well because my grandmother had German day workers, immigrants, work in her farm. They were boarders. They lived upstairs. I remember when the war ended, there was a lot going on in the neighborhood. Everybody screaming, blowing horns. They're blowing horns out. Probably getting nuts. all the time. They would be blowing a horn, the end of the war, the end of the war. And then everybody hawked papers. They'd hold them up and, here, read all about it. Germany surrenders. And they'd go out to the neighborhoods and people would run off their porch, give them a nickel, get a paper to see what happened. So if there was something of interest, or the Yankees win the World Series, you know, and then Sonny, give me a paper, give me a paper. Uncle Charlie got in the houses building on Depew, matchbox houses.
Mm-hmm.
They put 2 or 3 basements in a day. They came off the economies. They were making money during the war, but then now they started building automobiles that they hadn't made automobiles for use. They only were making automobiles for military. So now when they got new, people's cars were all worn out, they were buying the cars, they had jobs. When I was 18, my father was taking home he was making $140 a week. He was taking home $87 a week after the war. And I was making $250 for working construction. We never needed much. I think we more or less, we focused on our needs, not on our wants. Never had a new car. My father never had a new car. My first car was $50. I used my money from the paper route to buy it. 1950 Studebaker. The second one was a Plymouth. 53 Plymouth.
How much was that one?
55.
You can't buy a tire for $55.
No, you can't. So in 56, people were fleeing there because they were so strict, the Marxists, the communists. And they had barbed wire fields there. They had guards, and they would shoot the refugees escaping the Iron Curtain, they called it at the time. The communist side against the free world. And a lot of people tried to get out. So they would shoot their bodies and leave them there for a reminder in this no man's zone, if they made it or not. So John and his wife, he was a farmer. They had fruit farms over there. Wanted to escape. And he and his children ran across the no man's land. They were firing at him, and they didn't hit any of them. They got away. So he emigrated to St. Catharines, Ontario. And near Niagara on the Lake, he had one of the fruit farms. And he was doing that real well. But he had gone through some tough times. At the fruit farm, John was working on the fruit farm, and his wife and the hired hand were driving the bushels of fruit to the market that they had picked the fruit. They came up to a tractor trailer, and the guy couldn't stop. The truck guy, hired hand, it went under the bed of the truck and decapitated her. So he was homeless with he had no wife and and his children. He had to take care of his children on the farm. So he started drinking a lot. And he met one of my drivers, Frank Fiorillo. He met one of his mother. His mother was a widow, and he married her. He could never hold a job down. He was just like a handyman for hire if you needed him. So to help out, they had him start, because he had experience. They had fruit trees started there. So apparently he made the scene when his wife's head was on the road and his wife's body was in the car. So you can imagine, I think I'd be drinking too.
Did you have any special foods around the holidays?
Mount Plain made raviolis,
Meatballs?
meatballs,
What'd she put in her sauce, Mom?
spare ribs. We always had spare ribs and pork hacks. Oh, yes, and meatballs. And she had her own tomatoes. She had jarred in the August. They were fresh from the garden in the back, Pelisano's garden in the back. We always smelled the baking and the cooking from Montpellier in the kitchen because our bedroom was attached to the kitchen. Tradition, yeah, to put the tablecloth on the table and set it up real pretty. We started out with the soup and the special noodles. It was an egg noodle that all the women and the young girls, we were doing the noodles by hand, and they boiled them, and that went in the soup. And then we had the pasta, and then we had the meat came after the pasta. and that was the meatballs, the spare ribs, and then the turkey. It wasn't even called a turkey. It had a different name. It was the capon, no turkey.
Why was the salad last?
It was tradition. That was tradition. The salad was last. The dessert was always homemade. Mom Pauline would make pies.
Did Aunt Claire and Uncle Rudy come with their kids?
They did. They always did. Aunt Claire, Gregory, Linda, Mark came much later. I remember Aunt Madeline was at the table once in a while for a couple of the holidays. Grandma's sister, Grandma Pauline's sister, Madeline, and Annie. And after the meal, I was done eating, then we could go to the movie. There were 3 theaters, and we decided on which theater had the best movie for our age. Circle, Senate, and Marlowe. Those were the 3 theaters in the neighborhood, walking distance.
How much was it for a movie? Do you remember?
14 cents.
Did you buy popcorn?
We had to make a choice, either the candy bar or the popcorn, and I liked the popcorn.
Being that my mother was Croatian descent, we really never embraced the Italian cultural identity. We didn't talk like they did. We didn't. Even though we are embedded in an Italian neighborhood with my grandmother, my father's mother and her family, we never, we were more Americanized than the average Italian. About the biggest thing was St. Joseph Day.
We're celebrating St. Joseph today. His feast was yesterday because we're celebrating our dads. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Now let us call upon Joseph, the patron saint of this table and protector of the poor, and ask him to guide us in God's ways to keep us from all selfishness. So I'll lead, and then the response is, protect us, St. Joseph, from being selfish and possessive.
Protect us, Saint Joseph.
From ignoring the hungry and the homeless.
Protect us, Saint Joseph.
From neglecting the elderly and the poor.
Protect us, Saint Joseph.
From forgetting the poor of the third world.
Protect us, Saint Joseph.
From wasting the good things of this earth.
Protect us, Saint Joseph.
Because you care for Mary and Jesus, we pray, Viva San Giuseppe. Because you teach us to care for others, we say,
Viva San Giuseppe.
Because you protect us from sin and selfishness, we shout,
Viva San Giuseppe.
My grandmother made sauce. My mom made sauce and pies. My mother's a very good baker. St. Lucy's, we would have wheat that we pounded. You'd soak the wheat in warm water till the husk got soft, and then you put them in a cheesecloth or a cloth bag, a cotton bag, and then beat it with a baseball bat until the husk all came out, and then she'd put it in water. The husk would float, and then she'd cook, and we'd have it as, wheat with milk or oil and salt and pepper. St. Lucy suffered terribly because she spurred the advances of a noble person, and so they did her in with her eyes and so forth, and she became the patron saint.
What was your favorite pie that Grandma made?
Elderberry pie. My grandmother was elderberry and apple pie and pumpkin. She made pumpkin pie.
What chores did you do when you were growing up?
Once a week, I was washing the stairs. We were upstairs in Mom Pauline's apartment, 358 West Avenue, and we were upstairs, Mother and I and Paula, and every week I had the chore of doing the stairs from upstairs to downstairs. And there were over 15 stairs. There were a lot of stairs. And I washed them and wiped them, and that was every week. And I also helped Mom Pauline vacuum and dust. She had me on my knees wiping around the rug. They couldn't afford a wall-to-wall rug. So whatever floor, wooden floor was around the rugs and in all the rooms, I had the rag and the bucket, and I wiped and it wasn't a lot of water. You had to squeeze the rag
Mhm.
real tight and just kind of damp wipe all around the rugs. That was and I always help with the dishes. I don't remember washing that much. Probably my mother washed the dishes and I wiped. We had to go down the stairs. I carried the big basket down the stairs into the basement stairs and down, and I helped. It was a ringer washer, so I was on the other side of the ringer while my mother was washing the clothes. We would hang up a clothespin in the winter months. Many months we had to hang in the basement. Then the projects, we had 2 rooms downstairs, 961 Perry Boulevard. It was the kitchen and the parlor. So in the kitchen, we were eating our 3 meals, and then we did laundry in the kitchen. We had a ringer washer in the corner, and we cover it up, with a big sheet, and then we uncover it and wheel it over to the sink, the big sink. And the months we could hang outdoors, we were in the projects, so we could hang outdoors. We always had the line out. We kept the line outside.
What responsibilities did you have besides chores?
Yeah, we made our own lunch. Mother had it all ready. Mostly I liked peanut butter and jelly, but we did do bologna and mustard.
And you walked Aunt Paula to school?
Oh yeah, Mother left early. Yeah, Mother had to be to work at 8, and so she was gone at 7:30. So Paula and I, we were home.
Taking care of each
Yeah.
other. Or you were taking
Before
care of her?
that, I was with Ma Pauline.
Yeah.
With Ma Pauline, and I guess Paula was too young for school at that time. But once Paula got to be in kindergarten, then Mother thought it was time for us to get our own apartment, and I could be with Paula, get her ready, and take her to school.
Yeah.
And then Aunt Claire decided it was a good idea for Linda to come along too.
Oh,
Yeah.
So
So
3 of
lots
you?
of times I had Linda with me. I had to go get Linda, and she was never ready, and I was always pretty upset because I wanted to be on time,
Yeah.
and I had to go down a few houses, several houses in the projects to get Linda.
Oh, and she was the same age as Aunt Paula.
Paula, yeah.
So you had 2 5-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
Where was Greg, your cousin?
Gregory was never ready, and I just had to get going. Yeah, I just had to get going with Linda, and Gregory would have to catch up.
Did Gregory go to the same school, your cousin Gregory?
Yeah, we went to Holy Angels.
Oh, but he didn't
We
usually
all
walk
went
to
to
school
Holy Angels,
together.
but usually I was either alone with Paula or I'd be asked to take Linda because Gregory wasn't, ready. Yeah, I was 6th grade in the projects. Holy Angels on Porter and West. We had the Gray Nuns of the Sacred Heart. I loved them. I loved the nuns. I wanted to be a nun. They were very kind to me.
Each day I had to do the dusting, the furniture, do the dining room set with Life of Wood before lunch. And weekends I did the windows with Windex and shovel the snow. And when the coal delivery come, we had to shovel the coal from the curb in a wheelbarrow and bring it into a shed we had in the backyard, and that was our coal bin, and we'd have to fill up the coal bucket whenever it got low. And snow shoveling was a must. We didn't feel pressure to do it. I wasn't punished if I didn't do it. I was only encouraged when I was doing the job. My mother would be there telling me what a nice job I always did. My father never hit me, never disciplined me, never yelled at me.
What was your neighborhood like in the 1940s and the 1950s?
Oh, I love my neighborhood. I remember it was a beautiful street with lots of wonderful people sitting out on their porch. We've had different salespeople come in the street. The milkman, he would be coming. We had the coal man, like bringing the coal for fuel for the house. and we were friendly with all the delivery people. The fun was the vegetable man. He'd
Yes.
be yelling, yeah, corn
Yeah.
and cabbage, and he'd be singing it. He'd be singing it, and it was a big wagon with all the vegetables. It was wonderful. And we had the rag man. There was one more with rags. It was a trailer with rags, and I loved sitting out on the porch, and even though we lived upstairs, I hardly was on the upstairs porch. I was always downstairs with the old couple. I loved them, Palisanos, Mr. and Mrs. Palisano. They were like grandparents to me. They spoke Italian. Everything was Italian. You'd think I would have learned, but I didn't learn any. I just listened, and they would be talking. They loved me a lot too. And I love my neighborhood with the friends. Every house had a girlfriend that I knew, and they all went to Holy Angels, you know. Mrs. Mecca was across the street. My grandma's best girlfriend was at that time across the street. They were very close. Mrs. Mecca was over for all the holidays. They were very close, Mom Pauline and Mrs. Mecca. They played cards together, you know.
Did they speak Italian?
Oh, yeah, they spoke
To each other?
Italian all the time, and they liked it. They liked speaking Italian. It was very, very close to their heart, and their tradition was Italian language.
Now, did Grandma Nola make lentil soup, or was it just Grandma Winnie? Did Grandma
Oh,
Nola?
no, Grandma Nola. That's where
Mom
Mother
Pauline.
learned it. Oh, yeah, Grandma Nola did lentil soup.
You call her Mom Pauline.
Mom Pauline. Mom Pauline did lentil soup. She did a lot of different soups. I mean, soup was a big thing back then, because you could feed a lot of people by making the soup and then the pasta.
Yeah.
And usually the pasta was homemade, and I would watch her on the table rolling out the homemade noodles.
Oh.
It was always homemade pasta and soup, any kind of soup. Mostly it was beef, but there was chicken soup, beef soup, and lentil soup. See, it feeds a lot of people. It's filling. Yeah, it was pasta, and soup every night.
We had a rag man, as your mother said, and he bought rags by the pound. And we had no insulation for clothing, so they'd use all the reconstituted rags. During the war, they made blankets for the soldiers out of all the wool, re-dyed them. So he would buy them. Once a week, the waffle man would come by with his horse and buggy, and he had Crystal Beach waffles. He smelled the whole neighborhood. Everybody would run out. There were 4 for a quarter. Put a lot of powdered sugar on them. They were still hot when they came out. And everybody lived on the front porches. The old timers who couldn't make it, they'd sit at the front gate, hang onto the gate, smoking their pipes or Italian cigars. And they'd take conversation up on anybody walking by. My Uncle Kelly Manuel is the son of my Uncle Frank, Fran Magyar's grandfather. He married my mother's sister, Helen. My dad and Uncle Kelly opened up a dance hall so they could meet the local girls. That's where we met my mother. Still there, the hall. In those days, they were doing bootlegging, and there was canals down 4th Street, and they'd take the bootleg liquor in there. Uncle Kelly, Uncle Andy, and a few other guys were making liquor because it was prohibited. Judges would buy it, police would buy it, everybody would buy it because nobody was paying attention. Uncle Kelly went in to sell some liquor into Buffalo. Well, Mary Lavulo's husband was a bootlegger as well. He would sell to all the politicians and all the upper crust of Buffalo. So Uncle Kelly come into Buffalo, half price his liquor they made in the farm. So they got in the shootout. 2 brother-in-laws. Uncle Kelly shot here in the neck, talking in the jaw and one of his back. He drove home with his friends, and so Uncle Frank and Uncle Sam brought them all together. This has got to stop. We can't have that problem anymore. Kelly, you stay in Middleport. You don't come to Buffalo no more. Sam, you don't go to a farm, Uncle Frank's farm no more with Mary Lavulo. That was his niece. So you don't go there anymore to see your uncle, and you don't come over here to see him. at Truce Hell all the way.
You had your favorite stores or bakery?
Uncle Jim, Rosie's father, had the hardware store across the street. Frank Fiorillo lived next door to them. Aunt Lemonade, we used to call it, because she used to give lemonade out because she had a candy store. You could buy magazines and things like that there. Candy, magazines, lemonade, ice cream. She used to make her own ice cream. And then the other corner was Kaiser Coal Company. Uncle Charlie bought Kaiser Coal Company. Then in 1947, he opened up Pinto Cleaners. That's how we got to know Donnie Burns, because Donnie Burns' father, the Burns brothers, used to run all the tuxedos for all the weddings in Buffalo downtown. And I used to clean the centrifuges out. That was the dirt that came out of the clothes, would spin out of the clothes. My job was to clean the filters in the dryer, clean the sludge out of the centrifuge. I was doing that when I was 10, 25 cents a weekend.
Did they have an ice cream guy coming around?
No, because there was so many ice cream stores on the street. There was one in Intern Block next to the Christophers, who were related to Bartolomeo's are Christopher. So right next to them, there was a small candy store that you can get
That ice
magazines, comics. So that's what the neighborhood looked like.
High school, what high school did you go to?
Grover Cleveland. And I walked to school. There was no school bus. There was a NFT bus, and we could have, but we didn't have the money. On the days that it was storm or raining, then Grandma would have the 25 cents. I would walk anyway and keep the 25 cents to have ice cream in the cafeteria. We didn't take the bus on a storm or the rain. We'd walk, everybody walked. We'd be all wet, soaking wet, but we got to school. It was good at school because I had my friends, and we went to school with friends, and we went home with friends, and we went right home after school. High school, we didn't have a uniform, but we still changed our clothes, because at that time you had shoes for school and shoes for play and sneakers for gym. Then we would go out, go to the house of a friend, or we just find them outside. Just a lot of walking and talking, and we had chalk. Oh, we got in trouble with the chalk because we were writing all over the buildings. Yeah. Oh, my mother says I had to, when she found out about it, because it was a bad thing we were writing, Penny loves George and George loves Penny, and we had big hearts. And so the buildings had to be washed. So Mother got the bucket, and she showed me, where did you write? Wherever you wrote with chalk, we're gonna get the sponge and we're gonna wash it off. And that was a big memory I have, because it was kind of embarrassing that my mother was walking with a bucket of water and I had a sponge. I had to wash it off. After school was roller skating. I had roller skates, and you had the key at the time. I had a bike at one point, but it was stolen. My bike was stolen. My mother made payments after that. I didn't have a bike, and she's making payments for a whole 6 months. It was awful. Had it in the hallway, and I didn't expect anyone would take it. I didn't have no lock and key on it, so I was back to using roller skates. We found out later in my teenage life that there was a roller rink. Then we would go there once a week.
Rainbow Rink.
Yes.
How did you get there?
Oh, we walked everywhere. That rink we went to after, when I had children.
Did you have sleepovers?
I didn't, for whatever reason. It was always Nancy. Had our sleepovers at Nancy's house. Sometimes there'd be 3 of us or 4 of us. Sometimes just me and Nancy. But it was a lot of sleepover at Nancy's.
Would you do fun things at night?
Oh yeah. We didn't have no television. We'd call a friend and talk on the phone.
What led you to your profession or trade?
When I was very young, I spent a lot of time at the farm. We're always fascinated with the horses and with the equipment they had on the farm, and we were allowed at a very young age to run the tractors and start them.
There was no batteries at the time, so he had to jump them with the magneto by hand, which was quite challenging. In Buffalo, my father talked to Uncle Charlie when I was 10. I was looking for a job. I remember me going with him to the office of Uncle Charlie and him asking me if I would want to come work with him. After schools, I would go when the trucks would come in at 4:30. That time they worked from 8 to 4:30. I would gas them up, fill out the gas log for each truck, and get their tickets from the truck, from their time book, and bring them in and put them on their office decks for Rosie. It was my job. On weekends, I would wash Uncle Charlie's car, detail it every weekend, because he smoked cigars. And in between time on Saturdays, I would wash the sidewalks around the garage. So I did that from 10 to 11. When I turned 11, he gave me an additional job of washing the trucks, washing his car, and then greasing trucks. So I greased trucks till I was about 14. When I was 15, he started me at pulling wrenches with the mechanics. Al Wozniak, the mechanic. I would help Al handing wrenches and washing off parts so they could be reinstalled in the truck. I started changing oil in the trucks. And when I turned 16, Al was fixing tires one day, and he was airing it up. It was on the truck. He put it back on the truck after fixing it. And as he was airing it up, the tire blew the ring, flipped him over the truck, and broke both his legs and both his arms. He was out of commission. There was nobody to fix trucks, so I started fixing tires instead. Uncle Charlie hired Al Wozniak's son, Joe Wozniak. He used to work at the Ford plant. He came to work as a mechanic. I shifted into changing oil, pulling wrenches, and fixing tires. And Anna's neighbor, Herb Smith, had a Ford tractor, an 800. And he used to let me drive it one summer. He'd give me 50 cents a day to mow the grass for hay. I got out of high school. I went to ECC for one semester for construction technology. In between time, I was plowing snow in between semester at Mobile, Allied Mills, Rich Products, Millers Fillmore Hospital. Uncle Charlie was paying me pretty good, $83 a week. So when we went away to get married, I had my check of $83.46 in cash to go to get married. When I came back from being married away in Vegas, Uncle Charlie gave me a raise to $100 a week and got me into the union. Once I got in the union, on the union job, he paid me, the going rate was $2.43 an hour, plus pennies. My father was only taking home $100 a week from Chevy plant. At 63, 5 years later, he made me a partner. He gave Rosie 10% as secretary. I was the third, and he was the remainder.
Tell me what kind of music you liked when you were growing up. Would you listen to the radio?
Oh yeah, that's all it was, the radio. There was upstairs the dance hall. And Holy Angels had a dance too once a week. But being I lived in the projects, Mother wouldn't let me go. It was dark, and I'd have to walk quite the distance, like I told you, from the projects to Holy Angels, and the dance hall was on Porter and West.
Who did you like?
Bobby Darin.
Somewhere beyond the sea, somewhere waiting for me.
It was fast. There was a dance program on every day. You put the TV on at 4 o'clock, and there was this dance program on, very popular with young teenagers, and the music, of my era.
American Bandstand?
Yeah.
We're going hopping today, where things are popping. The Philadelphia way, we're gonna drop it. And all the music they play on the bandstand. We're gonna swing it, we're gonna swing it.
So how old were you when you got a TV?
Yeah, we were in the projects and we had a television. There was a box on the floor with the antenna.
Did you ever go to a musical concert?
I think we did go one time with the class, with the whole school. We were bused to the Kleinhans. We had to bring the money in, though. It was their practice in Wednesday morning, but so we had to pay for the bus, and the bus would take us over to the Kleinhans.
Tell us about your first hot rod.
51 Ford hardtop coupe. I put an Oldsmobile J3 engine. It had 3 carburetors on, a very hot engine, and slick tires on the back. And so we used to drag at the foot of Michigan Avenue. There's that little strip between the big sand pile alongside the Skyway. And the girls and everybody used to wait at the other end, and they would flag us down to one. It was a hot car. It was well known for everything. So I never got to repaint it. It was like a Federal blue, and I just primed it and never painted it. Never got to it. One incident on my hot rodding was that we were racing before they built the 190. Perry Boulevard existed there. From Porter Avenue, the end of Niagara Street, near the Peace Bridge, to downtown Buffalo. It was an old canal. And years ago, they filled the old canal in. When they opened up the big harbor, they filled it in. But prior to them filling in, my father used to jump off a trestle there. He started drowning. 2 guys saved him. They brought him home to my grandmother, and he was still coughing up water and stuff. She gave him a quarter. Thank you very much. Thank you for saving my life. My aunt would always joke, later on in life, your life was only worth a quarter. We would drag race from Porter Avenue straight down and be doing 100 miles an hour, 105. We would take off. Most people would give up, they know they were beat, they were beat up. But sometimes when you had to really race the guy out, I'd race him out. And I'd be going too fast to go straight because I'd go off the end. So I took that Skyway ramp at 105. And one incident I had in my hot rodding days was the town of Evans bought new Interceptor Oldsmobiles with the same engine I had, the J2 engine, 2-barrel carburetors. Hot engines, but mine was modified as we opened up the port so it could take more gas, more powerful. The guys used to go out to Lerzek's out to Angola, the hot spot to everybody go. The cops would always meander there. They were young folk too. They said, you guys better not monk around on Route 5. You better not monking around. Believe me, we got hot cars now, we'll catch you. You're going to jail, we'll take you downtown. So I had Tom Jobber in the car. I had John Miliota in the car, his cousin. Johnny was in the back seat, Tom was in the front seat. We're going down Route 5. I'm doing about 80 or 90. Out comes the cop. Now the light's coming on. So I poured the coals to her. So he called support in. And every time he would get up to me, I would step on, I had an afterburner in it. So I'd hit the afterburner that would give it like a nitro boost, and I'd pull away from that. And they tried to head me off at Shelkoff and other places down the way near Angola. My speedometer only went to 120. I was at 120 and it was bending itself, it wasn't going nowhere. And I lost them. They chased me almost all the way to Ripley on Route 5, and I cut over on 20 at Silver Creek and then took 20 out. They were following me all the way, and they got some help at Silver Creek. They got their cops out. And so we wound up in Erie, Pennsylvania. Didn't have no money with us, so it wasn't, just weren't prepared for that. So we were running low on gas, so we'd go to gas stations and we'd take it off because they didn't suck the gas back out like they do now. The hose would say fill. So we had a quart bottle, and we filled the bottle up, drained the hose. We got enough gas. They said, we can't go back Route 5. They're going to be waiting. They're going to be roadblocks and everything. We wound up going way back toward Jamestown, coming all the way up the back way to Orchard Park. And they always talked about it. If he comes out here again, they got the Ford, we'll catch him. He was just lucky. We didn't want to hurt nobody.
Tell me how it was moving into the Lakeview projects before you were married. How old were you?
6th grade. I was at the age 12 that I could take care of my sister, 5 years younger, and bring her to school. Holy Angels, it was quite the walk.
What was your address in the Lakeview projects?
961 Perry Boulevard. And I was taking care of my sister. Mother had to leave, and so Paula and I had to get dressed in our uniform, and I had to make sure my sister had her breakfast. and then we both had a bag lunch.
When you came home from school, was Grandma still working?
Oh yeah, she wasn't home. She didn't get home till 4 or 5 o'clock. And so when I went home, I had the key, to get in the house with my sister. And then we had chores to do. We had to do this, that, and the other thing. We had to make sure the beds were made, and we had to do our homework, and we had to vacuum. We vacuumed.
Did you have any friends in the Lakeview projects?
My special friend was next door, Joanne DeFiglia. She lived right next door, and they had like 10 kids. It was a big family, all in that next door apartment. And the other one was that I went to school with, Nancy Favetta now I'd go to her house, and she was in the projects too. I'd go to her house, and we did everything together. We were really more like sisters.
What would you do with her?
It was more walking and talking and swimming across the street. We had to cross the boulevard. There was a hill, and then once you get up the hill, you walk a little bit to the pool, and there was a hole in the fence. And another memory was Mother would decide what we were having for supper, and because she didn't get home till 5 o'clock, I always had to get it going.
Was there one special dinner that you like to make?
Yeah, it was macaroni and cheese and cube steaks. The same thing I did when I got married and had my own children. Lots of chicken, we'd wash it in salt, and then we made soup.
Memories of cousins' picnics at Padina's cottage. And now tell us why you called her Padina.
She was the only daughter on the Panapinto side, other than Rosie. Rosie Murata, her first cousins. She got married in 1947. She used to work at the Liberty Laundry Company on Connecticut Street. They did laundry for the rich people on Richmond Avenue and up that way. Quite frankly, the guys didn't go to church too well. The only one that was capable of being a godparent. So she was godparent to almost all our cousins. So they would always say Parina. So Parina was called Parina because she was a Parina to a lot of people.
Their cottage was off of Route 5, Angola.
Yeah, Hamilton Boulevard. So we went to a picnic every year. My mom would make certain things. My mom would make the sauce. My grandma would make the sauce. She'd make snails sauce, delicious. It's real rich sauce with homemade bread. So we got together, everybody bought potluck to a picnic.
Who were the cousins that were included?
Uncle Guy and Aunt Parina's and their family and their kids, Junior, Anthony, Joey, my cousin Anthony, Uncle Charlie's son, his wife and their kids, me, Chucky, Richie on our side. Rose Murata would come. She'd make desserts. She made sticky buns or stuff like that. Dad, raspberry cup cookies. They were butter cookies filled with a raspberry jam for dessert. Now and then my mom would make strawberry shortcake to bring with us. Uncle Guy sometimes would invite his sister, Connie Latona. She wasn't a Latona, she had a married name. So she'd come with her husband, and she had a daughter. And that's all. It was just Uncle Guy, his sister, and my grandmother, obviously.
High Hat Dry Cleaner. Across the street from the Niagara Theater. Grandpa Zarbo owned he had 2 locations, one on Grant Street and one on Niagara. Mother needed money to help out, and she mentioned it to the Zarbo family that she hadn't been getting any support from Tony Zarbo, my dad, her ex-husband. So they says, how about, is she old enough to help on Saturday in the cleaners? And Mother says, yeah, she could help out a couple hours. So I was hired to go there on Saturday, 11 in the morning until 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. And I was on the counter in the cleaners, and I take in the clothes, mark them. It had to be pinned and then put in this big bag, for cleaning. I was 12. Then people would come in and ask for their cleaning, so they'd have their number, and I'd say, "Excuse me, I'll be right with you." And the clothes were on this iron, and I would find it and give it to them, and then I'd tell them how much, because on the hanger with the clothes they had a price, and then they'd give me the money, and I'd have to give them the change. Meantime, Grandpa was in the back doing alterations or dry cleaning, and he had a kitchen in the back, even further back, because the building was long, with apartments upstairs on the corner now of Niagara, Maryland. And he had food back there because he didn't go out to eat. And I had to do the same thing. I had to either bring my lunch or go next door because there was a deli next door.
How much did you get paid from Grandpa?
The $10 that my father was supposed to pay every week.
War was at the forefront of a lot of what was going on in our life. We had air raids in school. We had to get under our desks. When the air raid siren sounded, we all had to get under a desk and stay there and cover ourselves. So I spent a lot of nights, I was designing submarines. I made submarines that were very functional to today's standards. Teachers, everybody wanted to see them because I was designing submarines, silent submarines. I made models and I drew a lot of pictures and descriptions how to use it. The Vietnam War happened at the late 50s. I had already had 3 children. I tried to go. I tried to enlist. They wouldn't take me because I had 3 children. So war was always an eminent factor that I would go and follow my uncles. They were my heroes, coming back with their uniforms and stories they told. So war was a big effort. So how did it affect things ahead? It was something like you didn't look forward to, but you're waiting your opportunity to address a war. So I waited from the Second World War to the Korean War and then the Vietnam War. How did it affect my future? It was like, well, when I get of age, that's what I'm going to be doing. I'll be going to war. There were many mob murders in our West Side neighborhoods, a lot of them. And a lot of the guys used to play crafts on the corner with my dad that were shady characters. They'd be there to rake off the game. They get their cut. I didn't like that. To see after you won a hand that you had to pay off. It was a shakedown. So I waiting for your father. Dad, Mom's waiting. Let's go to see Grandma. Yeah, just a couple more hands. It drove me away from that kind of philosophy of street life that I didn't need. First of all, I had an active prayer life at home with my mom and being an altar boy, even till I was 17. What happened in the 50s is my path took that way because my faith had an effect on it. And my duties as to honor and protect the country were another thing. In the 50s, I got to work pretty good, making good money. I was making more money than my father was making at the plant, and I was able to choose my path to where I wanted to go. What I did in the 50s guided my way all the way through my life.